Hope you guys didn't go anywhere because we are back with your final top four match here at Salt Lake City Regional Championships. I am here with Aaron Zhang, and we've got for you Emilio Estrada versus Joseph Selmer, the modern gamer. We've obviously we've seen Emilio and Joseph a couple times on stream already, both running some kind of interesting teams today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Emilio kind of taking a team that's been already pretty common. Obviously, the Tapulele, Metagross, Zapdos core did win the Sydney Internationals, but the Heatran kind of the one thing that really sticks out. You typically see something like Tyranitar on that slot, but instead now we see Heatran. I think probably to potentially give those Incineroars give them a little bit tougher of a time, especially if they don't have low kick. And I'll be curious as to whether or not that actually makes an appearance as we go into team preview here, because I think you certainly could potentially justify it.
Yeah, and so on your screen, guys, on your left side, we got Emilio with that Metagross, that Amoonguss, Elandris there, and Tapulele, Heatran, and Zapdos on your right. Joseph with that Manectric, Porygon 2, Tapu Fini, Incineroar, Virizion, and Braviary. I think today, though, what I've seen is everybody's been kind of not taking that Amoonguss as seriously as they should have on Emilio's side, and that's been really hurting their game plan here.
Yeah, so fortunately for Joseph, he does have a bunch of answers to Amoonguss. He's got the Misty Terrain with Tapu Fini. You can't spore the Virizion even without Misty Terrain. Braviary, he's got Brave Bird and Flare Blitz, obviously, as well. But I'm curious as to how the Amoonguss is trained, whether it's on like the defensive spectrum or the special defensive spectrum, because if it's trained defensively, it could potentially even survive a super effective hit. But I think this matchup will be interesting because you've got the dynamic of like super heavy offense from things like Lele and Zapdos, which want to use Z moves, and Metagross, as opposed to things that are like slightly bulkier on Joseph's end, and won't necessarily get like one shots, but will be able to slowly rack up damage. I think Tapu Fini is a Pokemon I have my eyes out in particular for Joseph's end, because he's going to want to bring it to negate the Psychic Terrain. He's going to want to bring it to shut down the Amoonguss, and if he can avoid getting knocked out by the Zapdos, and I think Tapu Fini can really put in some work in this game.
So it'll be a battle of the trains as we go straight into this game one. Emilio leading with that Tapu Lele and that Zapdos. A really nice lead in general, but Joseph leading with Porygon 2 and Manectric on his side of the field. So we will be getting that Psychic Terrain up on the field because of that Tapu Lele.
Yeah, so Tapu Lele right now putting on a ton of offensive pressure, of course, with the Psychic Z move, which will knock out Manectric and will do a ton of damage to Porygon. Manectric, however, does have the ability to Snarl just to decrease the special attack a little bit. And Porygon, you got to wonder, of course, Porygon loves the Trick Room here, so we could maybe see a Trick Room setup coming out from Joseph's end. But Emilio, one of his answers to Trick Room is the Amoonguss in the back. So I am curious as to who both of these trainers have selected for the Pokemon in the back. But I think this first one is going to be a big deal. Zapdos right now is kind of in an awkward spot. Can't really Thunderbolt with Manectric on the field. Of course, if you predict Manectric to Mega Evolve, then yeah, you can get some chip damage off. But other than that, Zapdos really doesn't put on any offensive pressure right now. Wouldn't be surprised to see that switch out. But it's actually Porygon pulling the switch.
Yeah, and so Porygon being switched out for that Tapu Fini, so not going to give any sort of boosted Tapu Lele psychic moves, or in case that Amoonguss is in the back, going to be negating any sort of spore, like you said, from that Tapu Fini. As Manectric goes for the Snarl, going to be lowering that special attack onto both of these Pokemon. Going to be really important, especially with how scary that Tapu Lele can be. This Zapdos going for the Tailwind instead, giving Emilio a little bit of speed for the next couple of turns against all of Joseph's Pokemon here. And Tapu Lele going for the taunt into what was that Porygon 2 slot, so kind of maybe predicting that Trick Room potential.
Yeah, normally Tailwinding in the face of a Porygon seems slightly risky, but when you have Taunt's one of the best answers to Porygon, especially when it can't do very much damage. The Fini is able to come in relatively safe, though. Actually doesn't take any damage, and Manectric gets the Snarl off. Important to note that Manectric chose not to Mega Evolve to potentially redirect those Electric-type attacks away from Zapdos. So I think even though the Tailwind went up, Emilio was going to be outspeeding Joseph anyway, other than, of course, the Manectric. But I don't think Manectric moving first really makes too much of a difference, at least in the position that both trainers are at right now. So now Fini does manage to come in, and it shouldn't get knocked out by Zapdos. Can't touch it at all if Manectric stays on the field, and Lele's Z-move shouldn't be able to knock it out either. So this gives Fini an opportunity, but you have to ask whether or not Fini's going to protect here to potentially get, bait out the Z-move.
Right, and Zapdos being switched out actually on Emilio's side, going to be switching for that Metagross. This is kind of nice, side by side with Tapu Lele and Metagross, a pairing that we've seen a lot from the season. As Manectric does actually go for the Mega Evolution on this turn, going to be losing that Lightning Rod and switching out for Intimidate. Not going to be touching that Metagross because of its clear body ability, and will connect with that Lele, but doesn't really matter much because this Tapu Lele, obviously, very especially offensive Pokemon here, and leaving Tapu Fini free to kind of attack. Goes for the Moonblast, and is going to be going into the Tapu Lele goes for the Moonblast into the Manectric slot, gets a good chunk of health off of there as the Volt Switch from Manectric connects to the Metagross. Going to be going back to Joseph, allowing him to choose what Pokemon he has in the back here.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty interesting. The Tailwind kind of helps Joseph a little bit more in the sense that he gets to bring in something after he takes damage as opposed to before. So now whatever is coming in is going to be fully healthy, so that's a slight advantage. It's going to be that Incineroar, great Pokemon to have against Tapu Lele Metagross. It's actually one of the reasons why Lele Metagross I feel like is slightly weaker, just because Incineroar with Intimidate, it just matches up so well against it. It also allows Fini to get an attack off it. It's going to be a Z move coming out.
All right, so the Water EMZ from Tapu Fini going to be revealed right now, and I'm not quite sure which mono it'll. I want to say that Tapu Lele, but
it's tough to say. Yeah, we'll have to see. Either way, it's going to do a lot of damage, and it is going to be the Metagross.
Ooh, and like the Metagross going to be taking that Hydro Vortex from this Tapu Fini, and it is actually enough to pick up that knockout because it wasn't in that Mega Form, and so kind of a hard switch I think for Emilio to have made to lose that Metagross.
Yeah, I mean Metagross is one of the Pokemon that you would think would do more damage against the kind of team. You got Stomping Tantrum, which chunks the Incineroar if you can get Iron Heads off. It's a lot of damage that just comes out there. So really, really nice play there. Even though the Tailwind went up earlier on for Emilio's end, I think you can kind of see how this matchup spins out. The Fini is just really bulky. It has the Z move, which allows it to actually get knockouts as well. You have to worry about, the Lightning Rod. You have to worry about Snarls. And so right now I think the bulk of Joseph's team is just kind of overwhelming Emilio. He's got a lot of good tools, and the Tapu Lele Metagross, like this kind of archetype really wants to steamroll kind of quickly, especially get a Z move off, but no Z move has been used yet, and Lele is still at -1 special attack.
And now Zapdos is going to be protecting itself for any damage on this turn as Incineroar goes for the fake out into that protected slot, and Tapu Lele going for that Moonblast, going to be targeting down that Incineroar, going to be doing a lot of damage for that super effectiveness, but actually does get the special attack drop on it. Doesn't really matter on this Incineroar as Tapu Fini connects the Muddy Water onto that Tapu Lele, maybe looking for some accuracy drops as well on here, which would be, always like really nice to get onto your mons. Does not get it, but does manage to stall out through that taunt.
Yeah, with the taunt, it's kind of interesting to see the aggressive targets into Incineroar, but perhaps what Emilio's hoping for is to just get a big Z move off against Tapu Fini this next turn. Of course, we know Manectric has already chosen a Mega Evolve, so you don't have that Lightning Rod redirection anywhere. So, Incineroar right now is still kind of a threat, but yeah, to me, I think Emilio just really needs to deal with the Fini right now. The scary thing is, because taunt wore off, he easily could just protect right now and allow Incineroar to get a free attack off. So, Lele is actually going to be the one swapping out, trying to reset that special attack drop and get the Psychic Terrain up for the future.
And now we see that last Pokemon on here as that Amoonguss on Emilio's side as Incineroar also switches out on Joseph's side. We get the Manectric here getting the Intimidate into both of these Pokemon. Again, not going to be doing that much, but because it has Mega Evolve, that Lightning Rod ability is now gone, and the Zapdos is just kind of free to go for that Gigavolt Havoc into that Tapu Fini slot.
Yeah, so typically with the Zapdos-Lele combination, you expect the Lele to have the Z move and the Zapdos to have like a berry, like a citrus berry or one of those 50% berries. But instead, it actually is running Gigavolt Havoc, so that is most likely going into the Fini slot. Should be able to pick up the knockout, I suspect. We'll see, but I think it will.
Easy knockout on there.
So that's a really big knockout, just because Fini obviously just puts on so much pressure. But I think it's done a pretty good job so far. It's able to get that big knockout onto Metagross, and you don't really need Fini too much at this point against at least Amoonguss. Muddy Water's not doing too much to Zapdos or Lele anyway. And now that the Z move has been used, it makes it a lot harder for Emilio to get consistent damage off, especially now that the Incineroar has fake out pressure, the Manectric can still just keep clicking Snarl, and Amoonguss can't Spore because of the Misty Terrain. So I think Joseph's still in a pretty good position.
Yeah, and that Tapu Lele is in the back, though, for Emilio, so he has, that option to just kind of reset it and go for the Spores if he ever really wants to.
Definitely. But he's got to worry about, a double up onto the Amoonguss potentially. From the Manectric and the Incineroar. So, yeah, this will be really interesting, I think, because I feel like Emilio doesn't have as much offense left, and it's actually going to be a protect from the Amoonguss. So this is going to be a big turn, especially if Joseph tried to double up into Amoonguss.
But Manectric going for that Snarl, going to be lowering the special attack on that Zapdos only because of that protect from the Amoonguss. And now this Incineroar is going to be able to go after it. But Zapdos using Tailwind, going to give himself a little bit more speed control against Joseph's team. And Incineroar going for the taunt into that protected slot on the Amoonguss.
So taunt, an interesting tech there. It's not something that I would say is incredibly common on Incineroar, but it's definitely something that's not too surprising either. But this does confirm that it does have it. Zapdos going for the Tailwind. I'm curious as to whether or not this Amoonguss has speed investment and actually will be able to outspeed the Incineroar after Tailwind. Otherwise, it can just get taunted again. Amoonguss typically one of the slower Pokemon really around. So Yeah, taunt covers the options, and we are just going to see everything stay in right now. Let's see how much damage this all
Yeah,
does.
the Thunderbolt into the Incineroar only just gets it to, finally manages to get it to half as once more that Menetric goes for a Snarl. Going to be really negating the damage that Thunderbolt can do on that Zapdos. It's a -2 now.
Oh!
Goes for the Spore into the Incineroar slot, so it does make it faster, faster after that Tailwind. This Incineroar is going to be asleep now and won't be able to move on this turn.
Yeah, but, you know, I feel like still there's just not very much damage coming out from Emilio's end right now, and everything's slowly getting chunked down. I also want to know what item Incineroar potentially has, because if it is one of those berries that we typically see, then of course it's just going to be able to heal back, especially with Snarl. That's one of the reasons why Snarl with all these bulky berries is so nice, because you just reduce their damage output so much to the point where they can't get a huge chunk amount of damage out like all at once. Amoonguss and Zapdos right now really aren't going to be doing too much to Incineroar. Amoonguss outspeeding the Incineroar was nice, but it's already taken one turn of sleep, so there's a chance Incineroar just wakes up this next turn. I mean, Manectric is still free to just click the Snarl button. So yeah, I think even though Emilio does have the speed control going for him, he's still in slightly of an awkward position.
All right, Manectric protecting this turn on Joseph's side, so no damage that it's going to take as Zapdos goes for the Thunderbolt into that sleeping Incineroar. Does not quite get it at all into that red, and the Spore from Amoonguss going into that protect slot into there. And yeah, nice call on that one. The Incineroar waking up on this turn goes for the Flare Blitz, manages to go into that Amoonguss slot and pick. No, doesn't pick up the knockout on there, but does knock itself out with a recoil on that. So it does go down from its own damage on there and manages to activate the berry on that Amoonguss.
Yeah, if Manectric actually went for any attack there, like a Snarl or Volt Switch, that would have gotten the chip damage enough to knock out Amoonguss, but we see that Amoonguss can survive that Flare Blitz. That's actually so huge because, you know, you lose basically your best means of offense against the Amoonguss, and we are going to see the Porygon 2 come in. Download is going to, however, give it a special attack increase. That actually could be really huge right now because those Ice Beams will be doing a lot. We know Zapdos pretty much is dead weight, more or less, at this point, and we know that Manectric, of course, can keep clicking Snarl. So this is actually going to be a super, super tight finish. Porygon is going to be, it's going to have to put out a lot of damage right now because Manectric is a Pokemon that really just, you don't even really use it as much for damage. It's more just for disruption with Intimidate and Snarl. So no switch outs here once again.
All right, and so Zapdos, because of those Snarls, is not going to be able to do that much damage to this Manectric. Gets it just barely that half.
Ooh,
Manectric, and the Amoonguss avoids the attack on there as it goes for that Sludge Bomb onto the Manectric, and Porygon 2 going for the Ice Beam into that Zapdos slot. So
is that enough?
And it does manage to pick up that knockout on there, but now this Tapu Lele in the back is going to be coming in. This Amoonguss is still at like super healthy.
Yeah, so a lot of things coming out there, but one, revealing Manectric does have Overheat. That's not something that I guess should be too shocking, but it's still something that some Manectric sometimes will maybe forego running if you want something like Volt Switch, Hidden Power, Ice, and Snarl. So yeah, missing the Overheat, unfortunately, that most likely would have gotten the knockout, and there would have been a 2-on-1 situation where Manectric could just click Snarl on Tapu Lele. Now it's kind of awkward. The other question I have is whether Ice Beam will do enough to knock out Amoonguss. Amoonguss was able to survive that Flare Blitz earlier, so here we could just maybe see Manectric click Snarl and Porygon try to Ice Beam the Amoonguss. However, Tapu Lele hasn't been snarled at this point, so it should be able to knock out Manectric after one hit, and I'm curious as to whether or not it has Taunt, because if it does, you can stop Porygon from recovering, but it's going to be a Rage Powder coming out.
And so Amoonguss is going to be drawing all the attacks to itself, leaving Tapu Lele free to kind of just attack anywhere, but Manectric does for that Snarl. It is a spread move to connect with both of these Pokemon. Going to be lowering the special attack on both Amoonguss and that Tapu Lele. It's going to hurt Tapu Lele a little bit more, but being on Psychic Terrain, it still has got this big advantage as it goes for that Psychic and picks up the knockout on this Manectric, leaving this Porygon to just kind of go against both of these. Does go for the Ice Beam, and it is going to be rejected into the Amoonguss slot. And it's
enough.
It is enough to pick up that knockout on there. Ooh, so leaving the Tapu Lele on Psychic Terrain against this Porygon too.
Yeah, so the Rage Powder there, I'm not sure, maybe like Emilio could have considered going for a Protect or a Spore there. I guess like it was going to be targeted down by the Ice Beam anyway, but yeah, we're just going to see a Psychic come out. So one-on-one, but I think Porygon should be able to beat the Lele after the Snarl. That's so little damage.
That was really sad to on there as that Ice Beam because a little bit more than the Psychic does on that terrain. So it's just at this point, it's just a numbers game, and if somebody just wants to say, hey, maybe I can't do it. But the Psychic, once more on that terrain, going into that Porygon 2 slot, just whittling it down little by little as another Ice Beam into that Tapu Lele is actually going to be enough to pick up the knockout and give game 1 to Joseph.
Yeah, that was a really fun game to watch, I think. And I think it's also unique in the sense that we see two very different team compositions interact with each other. I think that still ended up being a pretty close game, and I'm still trying to think about like that turn where Emilio just gave up the Amoonguss, because thinking if he maybe protected, Lele could knock out the Manectric, and then maybe you could potentially get a Spore off. Although the more I think about it, Ice Beam would just knock out Amoonguss anyway, so I guess once Porygon came in, the fact that it got that special attack increase was so big. It was able to knock out Zapdos and Amoonguss from the ranges that they were in. I think without the special attack increase, neither of those faints. So we don't see Porygon too often used as like an offensive weapon, but you can just see why it fits into Joseph's team so well. He didn't even need to Trick Room to win that game. Porygon was just able to come in and just start Ice Beaming everything.
I think the other thing too is like even though like Joseph had won that, I think that it's like having protected his Manectric on the turn that Incineroar also went down, leaving that Amoonguss free to kind of do more things. He could have, I think, won by a clearer margin if he had managed to, like you said, snarl that turn and just pick up that knockout on that Amoonguss. But Joseph just kind of locking in, and wow, Emilio locking in immediately after as these guys go straight into this game too. You know, and if Joseph wins this, he'll be going in that finals against Matthew. So maybe a little bit of adjustments from either of them, but I think they had solid strategies from there.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm keeping my eyes out, like Metagross didn't really have much of an impact in that last game because of the Z move, and maybe Emilio didn't know that it was Waterium Z. That's not exactly the most common Tapu Fini set. So we're actually going to see him lead with it this time around, which I think is a nice adjustment that does put on some pressure more right from the start. And ooh.
Manectric and Virizion on Joseph's side, so get a little bit of change from both of these trainers right now, and this. Hopefully this Metagross gets to put in a little bit more work than taking attacks from that last match.
Yeah, I think if you're Emilio, you're a lot more content with this lead. Virizion shouldn't be able to put on too much pressure. Of course, it could go for like a Stone Edge against Zapdos, but I don't think that's enough to knock out. I guess the main question is whether a double up from Manectric and Virizion would be enough to knock out Zapdos. Metagross in a pretty solid position can hit both of the Virizion and the Manectric for super effective. Could just go for like a Protect Tailwind play, but Zapdos is actually going to swap out, and that's a good switch in, definitely.
Yeah, and so this Amoonguss is going to be liking that Virizion a little bit better as the Manectric just goes straight for the Mega Evolution on this turn. Going to, again, sacrifice that Lightning Rod for the Intimidate. Not going to be really touching that Metagross yet because it hasn't Mega Evolved. So that Clear Body going to really pay off right now for Emilio. And it is going to be protecting itself this turn, so no, not going to get hit by anything that Joseph's going to be throwing out to it. As it uses, as Volt Switch from that Manectric goes into the Amoonguss, going to be going back to Joseph and going to be saving that Intimidate for later as he chooses what mon to send out now.
Yeah, so lots of stuff going on here. I wouldn't be too surprised to see Virizion actually launch a Stone Edge into the Amoonguss slot there as well, if it has it. Incineroar is also going to come out, but these Intimidate so far not really paying dividends, as obviously the Metagross did not Mega Evolve, so it still has Clear Body. The Amoonguss switch I thought was really nice, but the Incineroar is able to pivot itself into a really good position. Stone Edge does come out, but it does miss that Amoonguss. Wouldn't have done too much, but chip damage is actually always important, especially when we saw the Incineroar damage roll from that last game. So Incineroar now does come out, does have fake out pressure. Virizion in a very awkward spot. You'd imagine it's most likely going to want to switch out, but this Incineroar right now is just putting on all the offense. However, we know that Amoonguss could likely survive a Spore from that Incineroar, or sorry, a Flare Blitz from the Incineroar, so it could potentially retaliate with a Spore into that slot. But of course, you always have to worry about Tapu Fini in the back as well. So
a lot to consider for them as they're like going into these next couple of turns, especially because you know that Metagross, if it doesn't Mega Evolve out there, if it takes a Flare Blitz, it's not gonna like that at all. But Tapu Lele being switched into that Amoonguss spot, so if Joseph went for that fake out, that Psychic Terrain is gonna negate that like just immediately from there, and Metagross gonna finally choose this turn to Mega Evolve. Gonna be losing that Clear Body for Tough Claws, but its damage output is gonna be a lot better after this Mega Evolution. And so now it's going to be going for this Stomping Tantrum
no
into
fake
the Incineroar.
out.
Yeah, no fake out from that Incineroar, so nice call on that. But does super effective damage in there, gets it into that yellow, manages to activate the barrier though, so Joseph is going to be back in the green with that Incineroar. Is going to be free to attack whatever mon on this turn. As Virizion goes for the close combat onto that Metagross slot, manages to get it just a little bit above half, does get the defense and the attack, the special, the drops on there, as Incineroar goes for the Flare Blitz, goes into that Metagross spot, doubles up into it, and picks up that knockout.
Yeah, critical hit there, most definitely not mattering, but there was a lot going on there. I like the switching into Lele to try to potentially block a fake out, but really nice play there by Joseph saying, okay, you're not going to be able to knock either of me out unless you have Zen Headbutt on the Metagross, but a lot of Mega Metagrosses will forego carrying Zen Headbutt for the Ice Punch and the Stomping Tantrum combination, and so as a result, Virizion actually stays fully healthy, get the knockout on Metagross. Once again, Metagross isn't able to do too much. Incineroar, however, did take a lot of damage, and its berry has been procced, and now Zapdos and Lele both really strong options against the Pokemon on Joseph's end. So going into this next turn, like, Feeny is still a Pokemon that I'm insanely curious about, and I think where Emilio uses his Z move is going to be really important for the remainder of these turns. I think, really has to have one huge turn where he's able to really utilize the Z move. If Emilio Z moves into a Protect and he loses terrain control, that could be really bad for him. So right now, Lele and Zapdos do put on a lot of pressure, but one of the things about his team is that he's able to swap out constantly for defensive pivots.
Right, and so Tapu Lele protecting itself as Virizion goes for the Stone Edge. Zapdos avoiding that attack, manages to get the Tailwind and the speed control for Emilio's side of the field once more, and Incineroar goes for the Flare Blitz into that protected Tapu Lele spot. So that Stone Edge miss is kind of huge for that Zapdos.
Yeah, definitely unfortunate there. You'd imagine it would do at least 50%, enough to bring it down so that another could knock it out. Now, of course, Emilio has full speed control, and he will guaranteed be faster. So, yeah, once again, my question is the Z move going to be used? Because I think Incineroar should be able to take a Thunderbolt from the Zapdos. Double Up will knock it out, but then that means Virizion will get an attack on. But we are going to see the swap out. It is going to be that Tapu Fini, so going to control the terrain.
Yeah, so always super important here as that Misty Train does overtake that Psychic Train. And again, he's got two options for these Z moves, as Incineroar also does switch out for the Manectric. It gets the Intimidate into both of these Pokemon. We know that this Manectric Snarl is one of its greatest moves that it has on here against both Tapu Lele and Zapdos. And Emilio kind of having decided what he's going to go for right here.
Oh,
as he does activate a Z move, and it goes for the Gigavolt Havoc. So the question is, which spot
did it target down Fini? That would be such a huge target. The Z move choice here is just so important, I think, in this matchup. So if this is called correctly, this is a big deal. If it goes, otherwise, Manectric actually will probably survive if it goes into that slot. So let's see who it targets. It is the Manectric. And if you're Fini, that is the best use to see. You see Manectric does take some damage. It doesn't even fall under 50% though, but that means there's no more potential of a Z move anymore from Emilio's end. The Psychic is going to go into Fini though. Actually, it does a decent amount. So still not the end of the world, I think, right now, because you do have Tailwind control, so Snarl won't be coming out before you attack. You know that the Fini is Z moves, so you don't have to worry about a Berry. Potentially double into it, or maybe just Thunderbolt Fini here and go for a Moonblast into Manectric. Either way, Emilio has basically his two best offensive members out that isn't Metagross right now.
And so Manectric protecting itself, as actually Tapu Fini also goes for the Protect. So doubling on Joseph's side with that, as Zapdos goes for the Thunderbolt into that Tapu Fini slot, and Tapu Lele uses Moonblast into the Manectric slot. So, I mean, I think if you're Emilio, you were just that Gigavolt Havoc could have been somewhere else, and it's so rough to see that at that point.
Right, that's such a good point. And I think right now he's just going for the safest plays because he still has multiple turns of Tailwind, and he knows he'll be faster. So I like that. It's definitely not over for him right now because his Pokemon are really healthy, and Joseph really doesn't have too much offensive pressure right now. Manectric, not a Pokemon that's really doing much damage, and Fini is just in threat of getting knocked out by a Thunderbolt. Given that Zapdos has the Z move, it's obviously a more offensive variant, so I would not be surprised to see a Thunderbolt just knock out Tapu Fini. So I think Joseph here has to really strongly consider some switches, but no!
Ooh, double protect from the Manectric. Manages to get that double protect on here, and this Tapu Fini gonna have to take this Thunderbolt from that Zapdos.
Yeah, it's enough.
Manages to get that knockout, and he also loses the Pokemon with that Z move on his side. So the biggest attack from that Tapu Fini is now gone, as Tapu Lele goes for that Moonblast into that protected Manectric slot, and that Tailwind finally expires on this turn. And I think the Virizion might be the only Pokemon. Incineroar now hitting the field once more and has that potential for fake out pressure now that Misty Train is back up on that field.
Yeah, fake out pressure. The only thing is Manectric right now is just not doing any damage in return, right? Snarl, Volt Switch, Overheat, they really don't touch Zapdos or Tapu Lele at all. So it's really up to Incineroar to be doing a lot of the damage right now. But that Incineroar should faint most likely from a combination of something like a Thunderbolt and a Moonblast. And Incineroar right now just isn't doing enough. So curious to see, I think, whether or not Manectric stays in. Because could just click the Snarl button. Could also just opt to swap back out. But this is really interesting. Zapdos and Lele really haven't been touched at all for the last couple of turns, and I think you can see some of the weaknesses of running a more slow defensive team such as Joseph's.
All right, and so Mungus being switched out, being switched into that Tapu Lele slot, as Protect from Zapdos going to keep itself from being hit by any sort of moves, and Incineroar going for that fake out into that Zapdos slot, going to lose that fake out from this turn now, as Manectric goes for the Snarl, going to connect only with that Mungus, going to drop its special attack stat. We know that, it does not take those Flare Blitzes very kindly at all. But I think, like you said, Joseph's kind of in a slow spot here and not being able to really touch a lot of the Pokemon on Emilio's side.
Yeah, I just feel like Manectric is just in such a really awkward position right now because it doesn't want to switch out in the risk of, your opponent predicting you and just getting a lot of damage off, but you're also just not doing very much. So it feels kind of like dead weight right now, especially because Intimidate is absolutely useless against the core of Zapdos, Amoonguss, and Tapu Lele. So, I think if you're Joseph, do you just keep clicking Snarl and hope that Incineroar gets a knockout and maybe survives the Thunderbolt? Because that looks like it is going to be the case, as it's Incineroar swapping out to potentially go for another Fake Out in the future.
Yeah, so Virizion going to be switched out for that, switch into that Incineroar spot, as the Rage Pattern from Amoonguss is going to be drawing the attack from this Manectric, but it is going to be using Volt Switch, and so we will be getting that Incineroar back onto that field right here, bringing back with it that Fake Out pressure and that chance to kind of just bring back in another Intimidator with that Manectric now in the back.
I really like that play because he's actually able to swap things out completely here. He's able to reset the Fake Out. The Virizion is now out against Amoonguss, which means you can actually Stone Edge the Zapdos even if Amoonguss Rage Powders. Obviously, the Intimidate not really doing very much. Tailwind does go up again, so I think that's the third Tailwind actually of this game, which is not something you see too often. And more importantly, Misty Terrain disappears. We know the Amoonguss can actually outspeed the Incineroar under Tailwind. So the question now is, is enough damage going to be able to come up from Emilio's end? One adjustment is that there's no Porygon 2 this time, and I feel like Porygon 2 is actually really important in that last game, and it would be really good here right now. So Emilio's still not in a really bad position, but he's really got to start getting some damage off on the board, because right now he's just hasn't really done any damage for a while.
And I think he has to make that choice between that Incineroar and that Manectric, because if he's expecting that Spore to come out, he has to decide which Pokemon he can risk having as sleep.
Exactly.
And hopefully that Virizion can connect a Stone Edge into that Zapdos, which it hasn't been able to do very often. But Zapdos is protecting itself this turn, so any Stone Edge from that Virizion won't be connecting at all anyway. But it goes for the Leaf Blade into that slot, and now Amoonguss going for a Sludge Bomb instead, so no Spore in there. It goes to do super effective damage into that Virizion. As Flare Blitz from Incineroar goes into that Amoonguss slot, it might actually be enough to knock it on this one.
Yes.
And it manages to knock it out. So
a critical hit.
Yeah, that critical hit.
That one was really close, honestly.
That one was actually really tough because Amoonguss is so bulky. But now this Tapu Lele is back on the field, has that possibility to just kind of, Psychic into that Virizion or that Manectric if it chooses to switch into it.
Yeah, I think right now you can really just click the Psychic button against the Virizion and the Thunderbolt button against the Incineroar. Unfortunately for Emilio, there was not enough damage from that recoil to put it in berry range, and so now both of these are threatened. And I think this Lele Zapdos core has worked out really nicely against Emilio. For Emilio, it doesn't seem like Joseph has really found a great way to break it, and you can see both Pokemon are full healthy right now too. We know Manectric's in the back, so that's not doing very much damage either. Emilio's got full speed control going on, so I think he's actually in a really good position right now.
Yeah, and then Incineroar being switched out for that Manectric in the back that has that Snarl and might manage to knock out those drop those special attack stats onto that Lele and that Zapdos. The Intimidate obviously going for those attack drops on these Pokemon, and Virizion going for the Protect. Not going to want to be hit by anything on Emilio's side of the field, as Zapdos goes for the Heat Wave, only connecting with that Manectric. Really good move to have, especially against that Pokemon. And Manectric is still in the yellow there, but Tapu Lele's
nice
Moonblast
play there.
Yeah, goes into that Manectric, picks up that knockout, is going to bring back that Incineroar. But again, now you have both of these Pokemon on Emilio's side, still at full health against Pokemon on Joseph's side who don't like that Heat Wave and don't like Moonblast or Psychic from any side of Emilio's field.
Yeah, that was a nice play there. It wasn't a super aggressive prediction in the sense that, if you stay in, that the Heat Wave and Moonblast will both go off against the Incineroar, and if it's not going to knock. I don't think Heat Wave would knock out Virizion, but it'll still do a lot of damage. But nice call not to just Psychic into the Virizion. Getting the knockout there is really big. Incineroar here still can't Fake Out the Tapu Lele, so I think Lele is really well protected. If you're Joseph, you might at this point be hoping for a critical hit Leaf Blade onto the Tapu Lele to at least even keep yourself in this, because it just feels like he's got too much pressure right now, and the double does fail.
Yeah, and so that double Protect not working out for him as the Incineroar goes for the Fake Out onto the Zapdos, and the Psychic from Tapu Lele on terrain is going to easily pick up that knock on Virizion. So now it's just going to be this Incineroar versus both the Tapu Lele and the Zapdos as Tailwind expires on this turn.
Yeah, so that should be the game here, with Incineroar just really not being able to do enough. And I think when we look at, game 3 adjustments, Emilio has a really good combination. Like, it seems like when he has Zapdos and Lele out on the field at the same time, it just puts on so much pressure. And so I think, Joseph really needs to find a way around that. Snarling is nice, but you're not doing enough damage. In that first game, Porygon's Ice Beams was actually able to really end the game. I thought that was like a perfect end game. But if you look at his team composition, there isn't anything that really deals with the combination of Zapdos and Tapu Lele really well.
Yeah, and I think Emilio did a good job, too, because he didn't send those out
Right.
In the first place, and that had really kind of hurt him in Game 1. I think what's still hard for me is that we don't get a lot from that Metagross still on Emilio's side. Like, we've seen it go down so quickly in both of these games, and I think it could be more of a deciding factor on here, but
I think the key thing there was that the Metagross was able to get one Stomping Tantrum off in that last game, and that is able to, once you get rid of Incineroar's Berry, it's just a lot easier to deal with it, because then a double up potentially from like Zapdos and Lele can just knock it out. So, yeah, Emilio, I feel like in terms of Pokemon choice, he really might want to just consider going with the same ones. I think like Landorus is not very good in this matchup at all against the Fini, potential Braviary, and Porygon. Heatran I mentioned in the beginning, but
against that Tapu Fini with that Water EMZ.
Right. Like, it just is because of the Water EMZ, like that, in addition to just the snarls, it means like Heatran's not doing very much damage. So I think Emilio probably sticks with the same 4. I really like the Zapdos Metagross lead that he had that last game, and I think maybe like he should stick to it. And I think if you're Joseph,
you bring back that Porygon, because that Porygon had a lot against Emilio. There's not much I think we've seen that can touch that Porygon.
Right, and we saw that it did get that special attack increase right at the right time. So if you can, position yourself again to bring Porygon out during that time, then you're able to really increase your damage output. I think that's just so important, especially because Porygon's so bulky as well. If you get a Snarl or 2 off against the Zapdos and the Tapu Lele, then Porygon will be able to hang around for a lot longer. So
it just sits there and is like, I'll just take this damage. That's fine.
Right.
And so Zapdos, Tapu Lele is going to be the lead on Emilio's side as Manectric and Porygon too. So an adjustment from Joseph as well. I think this is actually a mirror of their Game 1 leads. As the Psychic Terrain from Tapu Lele is going to be on the field, going to be preventing those priority moves. And we know that either one of these Pokemon can potentially carry that Z move. And the attack on Porygon too is actually going to be rising on this turn.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Once again, yeah, some adjustments from both players. I like seeing Porygon back out, but of course it did not get the special attack increase this time around. Manectric does put on the pressure of Snarl, but I'm curious, like the Lele Z move at -1 might still be able to knock out Manectric if Psychic Terrain is on the field, but of course maybe we see a switch into Fini. I think Emilio right now is putting on a lot of offense. Like you mentioned in that first game, we did see like the Tailwind and the Taunt come out, and that might work out here again. Porygon here most likely I think is going to want to swap out. It's just like Ice Beam isn't really doing too much, and you think Manectric is going to try to maybe protect and stay in regular form, or actually go for a Volt Switch.
Volt Switch, and it stays in its non-Mega form as it goes for the Volt Switch into that Tapu Lele. Going to be returning to Joseph, so going to have some of his choices now to kind of figure out what he wants to send against this. Kind of like that same strategy that we've seen him use, and goes for the Incineroar onto this field. Going to get the Intimidate on there, and has a potential fake out pressure into that Zapdos for next turn, but also has just a lot of offensive pressure in general with that Flare Blitz, as Zapdos goes for the Tailwind on this turn. This Zapdos has been managing to get that Tailwind almost every single time it's been held on that field, as Tapu Lele goes for the taunt into that Porygon 2 slot. It did not switch out, so it will be taunted and won't be able to use any Trick Room in here, which very nice read on that from Emilio.
Yeah, really safe play there that more or less covers all his options. He knows, okay, even if you Snarl me, I guarantee we'll get my Tailwind up, and I'll prevent you from getting any speed control. The Incineroar switch in there kind of cool in the sense that if Tapu Lele did try to gamble a little bit and go straight for a Z move onto the Manectric, then it would be completely wasted. But once again, Emilio, like that last game, he didn't get the desirable Z move target, but it still ended up working out pretty well. Of course, it's important to note that slowly, if Lele and Zapdos do get chunked down, then we could see a repeat of what happened in that first game where Porygon 2 does eventually come in. But right now, Incineroar does put on a lot of pressure against both of these two Pokemon. So, Zapdos, I think, does want to switch out here just to preserve it. And Landorus actually comes
showing
out.
up.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this Landorus' Intimidate going to be going for both that Incineroar and that Porygon 2. Going to be negating the damage that Flare Blitz from Incineroar is going to be able to do. But Porygon 2 switching out on Joseph's side, and we will be getting at Manectric, who is at a non-Mega right now, so it doesn't get any Intimidate onto this Landorus. And Moonblast from Tapu Lele going to be connecting with this Incineroar. We did see it just do barely any damage before, and Incineroar at a -1 with this Flare Blitz going to be going into that Tapu Lele slot, but that chip damage from before is just not enough still. It's still now in like that yellow. Wow, okay, so I guess we can't eat our words that the Landorus is showing up now.
Right, yeah, I'm surprised to see that, but it comes out at a pretty good time. Get the Intimidate off against Incineroar, put on Earthquake pressure against both of these two Pokemon. It is good, though, that Joseph at least is getting damage off against the Lele, right? Because in that last game, like, Lele and Zapdos just were both out at the same time with full HP, so by slowly chipping away, eventually will be in KO range from something like an Ice Beam. But Incineroar is going to swap out here. I think that's a great switch to potentially take an Earthquake and, of course, conserve the Incineroar for the future for more Intimidates and Fake Outs.
It still just gets that attack rise, and now that Taunt is worn off because it did switch out, and Manectric Mega Evolving to that Mega Manectric, going to be getting the Intimidate into that Landorus slot, so it will be at -1 now on this turn. So hopefully, possibly protecting itself from any potential Earthquakes from that Landorus. And it does actually go for Rock Slide instead into both of these slots.
Oh, boy.
And does okay damage on the Manectric, still has a chance for the flinch it as the Moonblast from Tapu Lele going to be going into that Incineroar slot that is now that Porygon 2. Manages to get a critical hit on there. But the flinch on from that Rock Slide is probably going to hurt Joseph if he went for something like a Snarl or a Volt Switch into that Tapu Lele specifically.
Yeah, imagine Volt Switch would be like the optimal play there just to get some more positioning there. That was a pretty unfortunate turn. I mean, that was a lot going on there, but yeah, obviously Tailwind still boosting Lele, and Landorus, so you have the Rock Slide flinch chances, and with Rock Slide, there's always a way. So definitely a very unfortunate turn there for Joseph. But Porygon is able to come out. I gotta wonder what kind of Landorus set this is, because if it's Assault Vested or if it just is a set that has knockoff, you could actually potentially just eliminate Porygon right now, and I think that would be a really big deal, because once you eliminate Porygon, you're kind of in the same position in Game 2 from the last game. And yeah, I think Joseph recognizes this, doesn't want to lose this Porygon, and is going to swap out.
Then it gets it Incineroar, and so now that Landorus is going to be a little bit less threatening, but it's going to be at -2 now because of the second Intimidate from that Incineroar. The Tapu Lele doesn't care about those Intimidates at all, as Manectric goes for the Protect. Doesn't want to take any damage from any Rock Slide or any other type of moves, as Landorus goes for the knockoff into what was that Porygon slot, manages to hit, but does manage to knock off that Bear on Incineroar, as Tapu Lele goes into the Psychic where that Porygon was, doesn't affect that Incineroar, so Emilio just kind of covering his bases against that Incineroar, but Joseph doing a really good job of protecting that Porygon to save it for later.
Yeah, definitely. You would imagine if Porygon just went down there, I mean, knockoff Psychic most definitely, I think, would have knocked it out, and if that happens, then you're in a world of hurt. So reveals a lot of information, right? Now that the Landorus does have knockoff, which is a really big deal, and we know, obviously, that it's not choiced. Yeah. So to utilize that potentially. I'm curious as to how this next turn plays out. Of course, Incineroar coming in does have the ability to fake out the Landorus, but sometimes players, predicting their opponents to predict their fake out would just go straight for an attack, as we've seen with this Incineroar and multiple Incineroars. Landorus here, however, is going to pull out the switch after being intimidated.
All right, and so does have the Zapdos, and they're still being able to be faked out by this Incineroar, but again, not going to matter because of the fact that it had switched out this turn, as Tapu Lele goes for Protect, doesn't want to take any damage at all from either one of these Pokemon, and Incineroar's fake out goes into that Zapdos slot. Again, doesn't matter much, but the overheat from Manectric goes into the protected Lele slot as Psychic Trade expires from that battlefield.
Yeah, the Psychic Terrain disappearing means that the Psychic now definitely won't lock out a Manectric, which is a really big deal. And you can see, slowly things are getting chipped away, right? So eventually, if you can bring Porygon back out, then you can start healing. I mean, this game has been going on for, I feel like, a very long time. Neither player has lost a Pokemon yet, but I think that's really the nature of these teams. Emilio is basically looking for the perfect opportunity to finally start hammering down with offense, and part of the difference between this game and that last game is that, the Porygon has been able to just bait out some attacks, and it's forced Emilio to try to make some plays, and not necessarily have they worked in his favor. Yeah. So,
and Lele being switched out for that Landorus is going to be intimidating both that Manectric and that Incineroar on Joseph's side of the field. So going to negate that Flare Blitz damage just a little bit, and a Manectric actually going for a Snarl, but Zapdos avoiding that attack, so its special attack does not quite drop on here. Does hit that Landorus, but that Landorus just does not care about that at all. And Zapdos goes for a second Tailwind on here, man. This Zapdos just... That speed control for the Zapdos has been absolutely amazing, as this Flare Blitz from Incineroar at a -1 now because of that Landorus is going to be doing some okay damage in there. Does manage to get that Landorus into half and takes recoil damage. And, both players have been playing a really defensive game, and they're at a little bit under 3 minutes left on their your time.
Yeah, so Emilio finally gets himself in a position where he can just click Earthquake and either Thunderbolt or Heat Wave. He's got multiple turns of Tailwind. Landorus is finally in a pretty desirable slot. So Yeah, I mean, he's been working towards this. However, of course, he has taken a lot of damage on all of these Pokemon. We know there's the Porygon waiting in the back, but that knockoff could really be huge. Right now, I think if you're Joseph, you really got to consider just going for Protects and Switches to really stall out this Tailwind. Try to pivot yourself to a point where Earthquake isn't hitting you as hard as it really should be, and we are going to see that swap out from the Incineroar's end.
And so Porygon 2 going to take the place of that Incineroar, might actually get that special attack boost finally for that Zapdos. And so that Ice Beam potential is going to be a lot scary as Thunderbolt from the Zapdos goes into the Manectric slot, does some okay damage. It is at -1 attack as Landorus goes for the Earthquake, is going to do a lot of damage onto that Manectric. It is, I think, only at -1 right now, but it is still enough to knock out that Manectric. Not quite enough to knock out that Porygon 2, though.
Yeah, so the Manectric does go down. We finally get a knockout on that side of the field. But I think, Emilio set himself up pretty nicely. Now the main question is, can Porygon potentially go for a Trick Room? Incineroar's going to be able to come out. You can see that Incineroar's pretty low. Porygon's taking some damage as well, but now it can potentially just launch a Fake Out into the Zapdos slot as Porygon maybe attempts to actually set up a Trick Room finally. Porygon should be able to survive like Rock Slide, Earthquake, Knockoff. If the Landorus have superpower, I'm curious as to whether or not it'll get the knockout onto Porygon. If it's like max attack with Adamant, maybe even after Intimidate. Fake out target selection is going to be important for Joseph here. You suppose it would target Zapdos, but maybe if he's really worried about Landorus, he'll target it. So let's see.
All right, so actually just a little bit more scared of that Zapdos and then goes for the Fake Out on there as Landorus goes for that Earthquake once more at a -2 now on this still. It is going to be actually enough to pick out that knockout on Incineroar, not enough to pick up that knockout on that Porygon 2, leaving it free to either attack or use Trick Room on this turn. Does go for that Trick Room, so it's going to give itself that advantage on the speed for the next turn. And I think we're finally going to see that last Pokemon on Joseph's side, which if it's that Tapu Fini, might actually
it better be Tapu Fini, otherwise I think Joseph's going to be in a pretty bad spot. But it is that Fini, and now finally Joseph has actually, I think, been able to maybe turn the tides a little bit back into his favor, especially with Porygon's ability to recover and with Landorus just really not being able to do too much right now. I think, however, Landorus does have the knockoff potential, and Zapdos is always still a threat against Fini and Porygon. I feel like Porygon here more or less is forced to click the recover button, unless maybe you want to go for an Ice Beam on a Landorus and just go for the Z move onto Zapdos. But yeah, this is, we also have to keep in mind, like, both players' times are actually running really low. Yeah. Emilio only has 1 minute and 10 seconds left, and so he's got to make use of this because there's still going to be multiple turns of the game, and he's taking a long time on this turn.
He might actually go under 1 minute before this turn is over.
Yeah.
And he's cutting it really close at exactly 1 minute. And I think if Joseph's aware of this, like, his win condition could possibly be that timer right now. As Zapdos goes for the Protect on this turn, Porygon going for the Ice Beam, going into that Landorus slot, doesn't be super effective damage on here. Did get that special attack boost from its download, so does knock out this Landorus. Now this Tapu Fini is going to be kind of free to go for that Water MZ. Going to be hitting that Zapdos even behind Protect.
Yeah, so lots of things happening there. Porygon opting to Ice Beam instead of Recover, and I think that's a good play because your Fini basically covers the Zapdos attacking it all. So the Porygon is in no immediate threat, and I think you want to Ice Beam the Landorus there just so you don't lose your Eviolite. So now you can potentially recover in the upcoming turns, and so we might be seeing a full-on comeback here right now. Zapdos is taking some chip damage, but this is what we were talking about, right? Porygon was so important in that first game because it's able to survive for a long time. Fini right now still at full health as well. The main question I have is, can Fini actually knock out the Zapdos from the range that it's at with like something like a Moonblast? Because I'm honestly not sure it will be able to. Porygon can recover, but if Fini isn't able to pick a knockout, maybe we see a double up into the Porygon, and it is going to be Metagross coming back out. It is, of course, still sitting really healthy. No Z move left from the Fini, and Porygon shouldn't be able to do too much against it. So Metagross is actually a really good Pokemon to bring out right now.
Yeah, like, especially because there's not a lot, like you said, that Joseph can do against it. That Tapu Fini Birded Z move can't really have a lot of just offensive pressure against that Metagross and that Porygon too. It clicks Recover or he loses it this turn.
Right, and really nice conservation of Metagross this time around. I like it's coming up, but he is really running low at time. Like, I am anxious watching this because I feel like he's in a good position, but he cannot take this long.
Please don't throw this game just because of that timer, Emilio.
Right, like he only got a couple of turns left now, and he's really got to be pressing his buttons quickly now because each turn takes at least 4 to 5 seconds to input. So that was a really, really long input. We'll see. It's just the Ice Beam coming out here, so I think that should be able to knock out the Zapdos. Let's see.
Yeah, so Joseph's just going for it, going to knock out that Zapdos with that Ice Beam, but then Metagross on the field. And Tapu Fini with that Muddy Water connects with this Metagross. It is going to be a single target, so going to do a little bit more damage than usual.
How much does that do? No.
Half,
but the accuracy drop. That could be huge. Is it going to connect? But it targets Fini.
Oh, and gets it down to half on there. And now I think, wasn't it a Mungus in the back that he had left there? He's got 13 seconds. Come on, Emilio.
Yeah, it was the Lele, right?
Okay.
So, oh my goodness, this is so intense. But
I hope Emilio knows what he's clicking next because he does not have a lot of leeway left on this.
Yeah, I really am surprised he didn't knock out the Porygon there just because now Porygon could potentially recover. And Emilio has only 10 seconds left. He is going to time out at this rate. 10, 7, 6,
is Emilio paying attention?
5. Yeah, he's got maybe 1 or 2 more turns left. This is actually so intense. Here, with your Porygon, do you just go for recover? Do you protect with Fini? I mean, Trick Room is up, so probably not. It's a Thunderbolt coming out.
Yeah,
this might be a Thunderbolt, Muddy Water, double up into the Metagross.
All right, and Tapu Fini
but Lele gets the Psychic up first.
And it's going to go for that Tapu Fini, and it picks up that knockout on there, and this Metagross, if it can connect this next attack on the Iron Head, yeah, there we go.
Miss.
So Emilio, with 5 seconds left on his time, manages to win that match.
The Tapu Lele outspeeding the Tapu Fini.
That was so stressful. Like, guys, pay attention to your timer, please, everyone.
Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
That was just absolutely wild.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I really thought Emilio did not have enough time there in the end, honestly. But the Porygon opted not to recover at any point, so it wasn't KO range. And, the Lele outsped the Fini. I don't think, if you just go for the Muddy Water there, if Fini goes first, then you knock out the Metagross and you do a ton of damage to the Lele, enough where you can maybe just recover, stall it out.
That was so intense, though. But I think what really won that for Emilio was the fact that he kept that Metagross safe the entire time, and that was a great adjustment from his
And the Iron Head damage output was actually really incredible, doing over 50% there to the Fini.
That was also stressful because of that accuracy drop.
Yeah. Once the accuracy drop climbed out, after the Lele moved, I was like, oh, it's over. But he still actually needed to hit the Iron Head against Porygon, because otherwise maybe you just click recover twice.
Yeah.
Maybe you could take like an Iron Head Psychic combination. But with timer running that low, Emilio cut it so close, but so incredibly played. I really thought by both players. It felt like the first 2 games, it was pretty one-sided. In this third game, both players had a lot of tools. You had the Tailwind go up, you had the Trick Room go up, and it really just came down to the last couple of turns.
Recover could have made all the difference if Joseph had been so aggressive with that. But, congrats to both of them for making it this far. And so Emilio and Matthew was your final match, and we will have Kimo and Len as your casters for that final match. Thank you guys for joining us. That was quite the final top 4.
Oh, my goodness.